pleased to introduce you to our county partners for this endeavor to say hello. Bert Cox, co-founder of Corrales Indivisible, now Sandoval County Indivisible. Bert, do you have a few words to say?
Not too many words. Thank you for inviting me, and we'll try to publicize this as much as possible in the future. I know that we're having a conference at the end of April that includes all the indivisible groups in the state, and we've invited James Jimenez to come and talk to us at that time as well. So I'll be listening to what he has to say today too.
Excellent. And is anyone able to attend the conference, Bert?
No. You have to be a member of Indivisible, and we're not inviting candidates specifically. And right now I think it's completely subscribed. So
okay. All right. That's good to know. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Bert. All right. Laura Stokes, co-founder of Progressive Democrats of America of Central New Mexico. Laura.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see all of you here. I would like to thank Karen Schaefer for all her hard work in bringing this to the public's attention. One of the pillars of PDA is economic and social justice, and that's why we are supporting this amendment. PDA was founded in 2004 by people who believe that working inside and outside the Democratic Party can bring about positive change. So with that in mind, PDA-CNM has invited several New Mexico legislators, Democratic Party state legislators, to come to our next PDA-CNM meeting to discuss ways that we can get more progressive legislation like the Early Childhood Amendment passed in the legislature. So we invite you to join us at April 13th at O'Neill's in Nob Hill. You can go to pdacnm.org for details. The meeting begins at 6, but if you want to enjoy ordering food and drink and mingle and converse, just please come early. We welcome your participation for sure.
Thank you, Laura. Next up is Deb Dabson, president of the Sandoval County Federation of Democratic Women.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for inviting me. And Karen, I'm really so glad to get to work with you. I would like to invite each and every one of you, if you'd like, to come to the Federation meeting April 23rd at 2 o'clock. Right now, we're kind of in flux as to where it's going to be. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to set it up in Placitas. If that doesn't work out, then probably we'll be in Bernalillo. So we'll be inviting all of the current candidates who are running for different positions, state positions in Sandoval County to speak to us. So thank you all.
Thank you, Deb. Last but not least, Chris Dahl, board member, executive board member of the Democratic Party of Sandoval County and Placitas Dems and Friends. Hi, Chris.
Good morning. On behalf of Placitas Democrats and Friends, we're honored and proud to be a community partner in this endeavor, and we look forward to working hard to getting this amendment passed. And just a quick little plug, Placitas Dems and Friends is having its first in-person meeting in a long while this coming Tuesday, the 22nd of March, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Placitas Community Library. And we will be featuring the two Democratic candidates for treasurer, Laura Montoya and Heather Benavides. So you're all welcome to come and join. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Our thanks to all of you and to everyone who isn't a member or isn't aware of these groups. Please consider joining them also. In this time of uncertainty on many fronts in the world, it's comforting to have excellent leadership at the helm of our state. One of those leaders is Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, who is our opening speaker today. Lieutenant Governor Morales is a former teacher, state senator, and has a PhD in curriculum and instruction from New Mexico State University. It is my honor to introduce you to Lieutenant Governor Morales.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this subject and seeing the energy that's here from every single one of you. I looked through the list of all those who are in attendance, and what a wonderful, amazing, passionate group that we have for the state of New Mexico. I tried to log on through my computer, and for some reason it just wasn't working. So I switched over to my backup, which is my phone. And I'm again grateful for the opportunity to speak to this. And what a wonderful opportunity, historic, unprecedented chance that we have in the state of New Mexico to truly make a difference. To make a difference not only for the children that will benefit from this, but for families, the whole state. When we talk about economic development, it's tied to the improvements that we can make in this direction. When we talk about educational improvement, it's tied to the improvements that can be made through this amendment. These are opportunities that are going to be done, but it didn't come without a cost. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of emotions that went into this, and a lot of time that was spent. And I want to first of all commend the leaders in this call and those who are not able to join us, who kept the dream alive, who kept the promise of making sure that we were going to never give up, because it was a long road. And anything worthwhile at times takes a while to make sure that it can come to fruition. That is exactly what we saw. I see the sponsors of that, Representative Mo Maestas, Representative Javier Martinez, so many others who have worked for so many years, including State Senator Michael Padilla, and many others who I know who continually work. One thing that really stuck with me during this discussion that had taken place years ago, I had an opportunity to sit on the Senate Finance Committee. And as that would come in through our committee, there was many debates, there was a lot of discussion that took place. And even though I was in the minority of casting a yes vote to move this forward, we saw that it stalled. And the concern that was there was that we just weren't able to tap into the fund because of the harmful effects that it would have. And I never bought into that argument, simply because I saw what was taking place across the state of New Mexico. When we look and see and want to safeguard some funds, while we're seeing all around us the poverty, while we saw all around us the incarceration rates, the dropout rates, other impacts that have taken place, we didn't have time to wait. We didn't have time to make sure that we were going to preserve some funds while the state was hurting. And that's where I'm saying that there was so much belief, so much persistence that took place from many advocates. And I'll never forget sitting there in Senate Finance Committee and having a conversation with Bill Jordan with New Mexico Voices. And Bill made the excellent point of saying, we in New Mexico are blessed to have the lottery scholarship, where we give every New Mexico graduate an opportunity to go on to get their degree. But if we don't give them the building blocks, if we don't give them the opportunities at the earliest stages, the most critical stages of a child's life, the early stages, then they're never going to get the opportunity to take full advantage of then the lottery scholarship, now an expanded and ever more so important opportunity scholarship. That is a legacy that we have an opportunity to leave. Together as a state of New Mexico, we're talking billions of dollars of investments in the earliest, most critical stages of a person's life. And for me, it is somewhat I get emotional about, because I know that is what made the difference for so many of us who are on this call, is having that opportunity for engagement. In the state of New Mexico, we've often heard of our educational rankings, which we're making significant strides in. We're coming out of a pandemic. Under Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, we've seen that we've invested in our educators. We put more money that are going directly to the classroom. And we're recognizing that we're not going to focus on student achievement, or we're not going to just look at student proficiency. What we're going to do is we're going to look at student engagement. By offering student engagement opportunities like after-school programming, like safe daycare and early childhood center opportunities, we're keeping our children safe, and we're making sure to give them the opportunities for engagement that'll help us surpass student achievement, help us surpass the levels of student proficiency, and get to where we all want to be. This is a huge step forward, and I'm so grateful that as we look and see what this could mean for our state, that we look around and we say, that's something we should be proud of, but the work's not done. There's a lot of emotion that's going to go into this election. There's going to be a lot of focus. There's going to be a lot of unfortunate negative advertisements that's going to be out there. Let's make this be the bright spot. Let's make this be the area where everyone can come together and can agree. And if people still want to make the argument that we don't have the money to do it, let's just say, watch us. We're going to make it happen. Take our example, take our lead, because in the state of New Mexico, every opportunity for my children, other children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, depending on us to make the right decision. And I know we're going to continue to do it, but we're going to have that same passion, that same commitment, that same persistence that got us to this point to get it on the ballot. Finally, we have this opportunity, unprecedented opportunity to do so. And I want to congratulate every single one of you for making this happen. All the labor partners who stood in hours and hours of committee and making sure this was a reality. All those early childhood advocates, all those that came together and recognized that there may be things that we needed to compromise on. But at the end of the day, what we were not going to compromise is the need to come together and to make this a reality. So congratulations to every single one of you. Thank you so much for allowing me to have some opening comments on this and to really set the stage of what you're going to hear from some of the sponsors, some of the champions who have done this, and to share the journey of how this took place. I believe that I have some time for some questions that we're going to be asked, and happy to do so. But again, I can't say enough just how important it is that we don't take our foot off the gas, that we continue to push forward, and that we make this a reality this coming November. Congratulations.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for those words of wisdom. We really appreciate your time and your willingness to answer questions. So do we have any questions from the group at this point? If you would please raise your hand. I'm scanning the. No, I guess you covered it all.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I
There you
had
go.
my hand up.
Okay, thank you very much. Joan Baker, thank you. Please.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sandoval County Democrats, for putting this on. Being in this battle for 12 years, I really appreciate you guys taking this time and energy to bring attention and make sure we get this across the finish line. And with that, Lieutenant Governor, I just have a question. How do you feel the early childhood education and care department was at a pivotal moment in this movement?
Joan, so good to hear from you. Thank you for the many years of working closely together, advising me, assisting me, giving me some ideas of what needed to be done from the ground level, as you saw that. So it's good to have you on the call. Again, that was just a movement and the progression of what was needed to be done to set the stage for what we have with this amendment. Because we recognize that one of the arguments that was made was that we didn't have the infrastructure in place to get all this money out to make sure that we were going to have the resources and the facilities and the workforce to make this happen. So that was a stepping stone that moved in that direction. I was really proud to have sponsored the bill, the first bill that would create an early childhood and education and learning department. My first year didn't even get a committee hearing. Second year got one committee hearing, then it died. But again, that's part of the persistence that everybody brought together. And I think the recognition was that we have a K-12 system who we fund very heavily. And we have a higher education system that is funded significantly as well. But what we saw with the percentage of funding that was going to the most critical stages, the early childhood stages, we saw that it was not adequate whatsoever. And we needed to have a more balanced approach. This gave us an opportunity under the governor to make this a priority in the first year, to make sure that we can push that across. And I remember when I took the stage to get sworn in, me and the governor on inauguration day, right before we went up, she said, "I'm including that in my speech." And I knew at that moment she was going to include that in her speech, that we were going to get it through. And we were going to continue that momentum to get this amendment through. So it's been a wonderful journey, but it was an opportunity, again, a progression showing that the critical stages of our early childhood are so important that we're going to invest the resources. It was the legislature and now the public's opportunity to move that forward, and wonderfully job they did.
Excellent. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Next up is Lori Martinez.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Lieutenant Governor. It's good to see you. I have two questions, and I think one you kind of just answered, but I'll ask it anyway. It was aside from the generic argument of New Mexico not having the money or the infrastructure, what other arguments or attacks are you hearing that we should be prepared for?
And Lori, again, thank you. So many good friends that we're reuniting with that worked so many years on making this a reality. Yeah, the argument was one is that we shouldn't be tapping into some of the funds because we didn't have the infrastructure or workforce to make this happen. Another argument that was there was basically saying that we were going to start hurting some of the other areas that were being supported by this, specifically our school for visually, for the School of Blind and School of Deaf, who are special schools along with New Mexico Military Institute, special schools that get funding from this permanent fund. While those arguments did have some validity, it was also important that we recognize that we have so much in that fund that we weren't going to do any harm to any of those areas. So sometimes some of the debate that took place that we were going to be harmful and impacting some important, special, and unique resources in our state, we had to make sure that we made the argument that we weren't going to impact it, that we were going to make sure and invest in all of New Mexico, which in turn would benefit those 3 specific facilities that were used in arguments against.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question is from Brian Colon.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. No surprise that Sandoval County Dems can range for this incredible lineup. The one thing, and I've got 11 o'clock, so I've got to sign off shortly, so I'm glad I'm able to get this out there. I think part of the messaging for the success of the passage of this amendment with the population is really putting you front and center, Governor Morales. I think that one of the things I've taken pride in when I speak around the country is that Democrats always talk about education being the most important issue to our communities. But I always say that we really put our votes in that vein when we elected someone who has a PhD in education to lead our state. And so I think, and I hope that we continue to tell your story as to the importance of the education spectrum, because we are the state that has Dr. Howie Morales as Lieutenant Governor. And I think that sends a message as to where we place the value of education. So I hope that, I think when we're out there talking, we really highlight the fact that we have an education expert and leader in our executive in Dr. Morales. And I don't think we can undervalue that, particularly as Dr. Morales is a man of color. I think all of that matters in our messaging, and I hope we don't miss those opportunities. You take a look at who else you have on the agenda today with, Leader Martinez and the incredible Mo Maestas, who's been a champion. These are great leaders who really exemplify that we're putting our values behind our votes. And I hope we carry that message out to the population of New Mexico that's going to be able to make this a reality. So this was a great opportunity to be able to spotlight that, and I hope it's well taken. Thank you, Dr. Morales.
Mr. Auditor, thank you for those kind remarks and just the continual journey, because your story is exactly the story that you were just highlighting in me and others. I do want to just say one thing that has really stuck with me. Auditor Colon had made a mention. He made a remark that said that history takes attendance. And that has really resonated with me, because no better attendance that needs to be taken than making sure that we're standing up present to move this through and to make this amendment a reality. So thank you for those remarks, Auditor Colon, and thank you for your continued advocacy and the role model that you are.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next question, Karen Schaefer.
I will be quick. Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much for being here. Can you speak at all to what you think the accountability will be once this is passed and the money actually begins to flow into the programs?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Karen, because that was another argument that was made, was that how can we be having accountability to make sure that these dollars are going to be efficiently used. I have no doubt, as Joan had mentioned, the creation of the early learning department was a good step forward to help us create a system that was going to focus on the early childhood stages and to create the infrastructure in place of how that accountability could be done, to make sure that we're working with our public schools as well as all of our early learning departments to ensure for that. I have no doubt that the accountability pieces are going to be in place, knowing some of the standards that are going to be required, some of the follow through that's going to need to be done. It's going to be a process that I think will be created simply in the same fashion that we did our department. Remember, we brought in from our early learning departments, we brought in 5 different agencies where early childhood services were being offered. Those agencies were CYFD, Public Education Department, Workforce Solution, higher ed, and CYFD. By bringing all those areas into one department, there was a lot of efficient work that had to be done and the streamlining. So I know that that's going to take place. And I have no doubt that the state of New Mexico and our professionals in early childhood education will be able to be ever so effective and accountable on how these dollars are spent. The other piece of accountability that we're going to see is we know that we worked for years on quality of life, on child well-being, on all those rankings that we're continually working to improve on. That's going to be the biggest accountability measures that we're going to give our children the opportunities that they so rightfully deserve in the state of New Mexico, the land of enchantment.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. We appreciate all the questions and answers. A piece of legislation this significant takes years of effort on the part of many. Today, we have 2 New Mexico House members who led the fight, Representative Antonio Mo Maestas and Representative Javier Martinez. Representative Maestas earned his BA in economics and his BA in political science from the University of Washington and JD from UNM. He served as Assistant District Attorney for Bernalillo County for several years. He represents House District 16. Representative Martinez earned his bachelor's degree from UNM and his JD in International and Comparative Law from UNM School of Law. He has worked as a policy director and general counsel at the Partnership for Community Action, as a community organizer, and as a public health advocate. He was elected to represent House District 11 in 2015. First, we will welcome Rep. Mo Maestas, and Rep. Martinez will follow him. Gentlemen, you each have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much and good morning. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me and being a part of this and to reminisce, but there's still some work to do between now and November. So I just want to thank the Sandoval County Democrats for bringing us together. And of course, my prime co-sponsor, Javier Martinez, will join us. We'll try to take maybe 5 minutes each and open it up for question and answer. I'm going to do the boring part, and then Reza Martinez will do the exciting part and take a deeper dive into early childhood. But our state has a unique relationship to the federal government. Very unique. We had the population to become a state in the 1850s. Utah, Oregon, Wyoming, several others leapfrogged us to become a state. Finally, at the turn of the last century, it was apparent that we needed to become a state. The federal government put conditions on us when it made us a state in 2012. There was federal legislation in 1898, the Ferguson Act. There was then federal legislation in 1910, the Enabling Act, in which our territorial government at the time would be codified in federal and state constitutional law. That our state lands that would be given back to us by the federal government would be owned by the government of the state of New Mexico, but for only certain purposes. And so every square and tract of land correlates to an institution which would then benefit from the money derived from that land. So it's a very paternalistic relationship. And so this is not only funds early childhood, but is symbolic of just unleashing a future for New Mexico in terms of self-determination, confidence in ourselves to build a bigger and brighter future instead of just saving money for the next generation of poor kids. So 100 years ago, it was grazing, it was timber, things of that nature, maybe a few sales. Now the money is from crude oil drilling. In the 80s, it was dominated by natural gas drilling. But the state lands, we have 9,000 acres of state lands, 9 million acres of state lands owned by us, the people, 13 million acres of mineral rights underneath that land. And so the crude oil that's being drilled is owned by us, the state. The oil companies lease the land. When the oil reaches the ground, it becomes their oil and they sell it on the international market. We get a kind of residual from that. So anyway, we've accumulated millions and billions of dollars from that and makes our permanent fund unique. Most permanent funds, like they touted UT Austin, Harvard, whomever, is financial investments. Our fund grows 2 ways, from financial investments in international markets, as well as from essentially cash coming into the fund derived from state lands. So it can go way above 5% and still continue to grow, far exceeding inflation. With regards to the 5%, we let me take a step back. In all of these hearings, we heard all of these arguments, and then a wonderful thing happened in 2015. One of the main advocates for the bill then became an elected official, and of course, that's Representative Martinez, who's now the floor leader of the House. And so what we learned through all these hearings, through all these studies, through all these conversations was several things. One is the argument that you can't go above 5%, we flipped it on them. Because we don't take 5% of the fund. We take 5% of the average of the last 5 years of the fund. So for example, last year, the fund was somewhere in the neighborhood of $22 billion. We weren't taking 5% of 22 billion. We were taking 5% of approximately 16.5 billion, which towards the end of the fiscal year gets below around 3.9, 3.8%. And so it's just unconscionable to be sitting on piles of cash and only distributing 3.8% to educating and building for the future. Currently, as of January 31st, 2022, the fund is $25.2 billion. So on the campaign trail, say 25 billion, 25 billion, 25 billion. By increasing the distribution from 5 to 6.25, once again, of the preceding 5-year average, we can get closer to that mythical 5% that you're not supposed to go over. Also, the other top argument was generational equity. Mo, you're stealing from the future. How dare you? You have a fiduciary duty to future generations, and you're stealing from them for the current political situation. That we also flipped that on them. That is a lie. When you take a deep dive into the numbers, if we were to go generational equity, mathematical generational equity, it would be about 7.58% distribution. We are essentially stealing from the current generation for this mythical future generation, because the fund grows approximately 8.5% a year. And all you really need if you're going to have generational equity is just above inflation. Just keep maintaining the distribution and the growth of the fund equal to inflation. But lastly, just the struggles were tremendous. There was internal struggles. Where does the money go? There was, do we cut the deal at a 0.8? Do we go 1.5? The Senate, as you recall, in 2016 actually passed a 0.8 constitutional amendment over to the House. The House was then held by the Republican majority and did not get a hearing in the House. But we went with the 1%, not because it was mathematically, not that it was the best idea, but it was the best messaging. And so we're really grateful to the leadership in the Senate to go above 1%. Our partners with AFT and NEA getting a distribution specific to K through 12 education, because we need to maintain that coalition we built over the past few years, and all the struggles and all the agreements and disagreements, and carry it on into November and have people vote yes for the constitutional amendment. So it will go from 5% to 6.25 with 0.75 specifically to early ed, 0 to 5 education, 0.5 adding to the K through 12 bucket. And keep in mind, Arizona went to 6.8 with a Republican House, Republican Senate, Republican governor. So it's just a question of having confidence in ourselves to utilize this money to the best interest of all New Mexicans, so we could build a life, an economy, and a future for our best and brightest stay here, and it becomes the state that it was truly meant to be. So with that, I'll just turn over to my colleague, Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Representative Maestas, and thank you, Sandoval County Democrats, for the invitation here today. Look, looking at the agenda, you have James, you have Andrea, who are going to get into the weeds of the organizing piece, the campaign, all of the amazing advocates and nonprofit partners that got us to this point. So I'm not going to go into that space. I do want to talk about how important it was for this movement to have Representative Maestas as a sponsor. As he noted, I came into the legislature in 2015, and I actually ran in large part because of this issue. I had been an advocate working from the outside in, working on something that I thought was common sense. At the time, we had a $12 billion permanent fund, and we're asking for a 1% distribution increase to invest in early childhood. And we hit every wall you can imagine. And we didn't hit a wall with the Republican Party, although they never really supported this. We actually hit a wall with Democratic leaders in both chambers, mostly in the Senate when it was all said and done. Without the tenacity, without the commitment of Representative Maestas, we don't get here. And I want you all to know that, because As our legislative careers sort of progress, there are votes I take that I'm sure you all are not crazy about. There are positions I take that I'm sure you all are not crazy about. I'm sure Representative Maestas is in the same boat. Please remember that without Representative Maestas leading this charge, we are not here right now. It would have been very easy, as he said, to cut the deal years ago. It would have been very easy to say, well, we've got more money coming in from the general fund. We don't really need to do this anymore. But he stayed the course. He stayed the course and really, I think, created an environment where the opposition became indefensible, specifically speaking to what he spoke to you all about just minutes ago. The math. The math does not lie. The math tells us that this fund will not only continue to grow, but the math also tells us that there are deep inequities embedded in how this fund was even set up in the first place. And those are things that I think we need to remember as activists and as advocates, because this is just one issue of many others that many of us are going to be working on over the next 10, 15, 20 years that will require the same type of tenacity, the same type of commitment, and the same type of discipline when it comes to staying the course. This issue to me is very personal. I came into this work, as I said, working as an advocate, eventually running for the House and getting elected to the House, and then becoming one of the primary sponsors of this thing over the last 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been. I've seen our coalition shrink to just a few of us and grow to what it is now, which is a multi-million-dollar statewide campaign to get this ballot initiative passed by the voters. This is arguably the most bold redistribution of wealth from the higher echelons of Wall Street finance and oil and gas back into communities that not only need it, because let's think about how this land was even made profitable and who it was taken from. When you think of the fact that 84% of children between the ages of 0 and 4 are children of color, when you think of the fact that third grade reading levels for those same children are dismal, you can start to see the gross inequity that is embedded in all of this. This could very well be the most aggressive racial equity proposal that any of us has ever seen in the state of New Mexico. We don't talk about that enough. We didn't lead our arguments with that during the legislative sessions past. We focused on the math and we focused on the numbers. But when it comes down to it, this is truly an equity-driven proposal that over the life of this, over the next 20 years, you are going to see a dramatic shift in how our children are being raised here in the state of New Mexico. People talk about New Mexico being a poor state. We're a poor state. We're a poor state. We're not a poor state. We have the economy to support not only a world-class early childhood system, but also a world-class healthcare system and a world-class education system from zero all the way through college and trade school and whatnot. Unfortunately, we have sort of fallen victims to this mentality of poverty, where we stuff money under the mattress, as Representative Maestas likes to say, right? We've got a windfall of money. The first thing we do is we go create some fund somewhere to put the money away instead of investing it in our families, in the most vulnerable, in communities that we know for a fact can take $1 and turn it into $15. And that's exactly what's happening with this constitutional amendment. The last thing I'll say is this is not about sticking kids in a classroom starting at 3 years of age. That's fine. Some parents may choose to do that. Some parents may choose to put their kid in a pre-K with 15 other kids. That's great. Other families, and I'll tell you that from firsthand experience as an advocate to this day, many families prefer to have their child across the street from their house with their neighbor who has another 4 little kids that they take care of. Why? Because there's trust, there's nurturing, there are homemade meals that somebody's grandma's making for them, and they are being taken care of. There's a whole sector of this system that is propped up by home-based childcare providers. These may not be the cream of the crop when it comes to quality standards set forth by academics, but by my goodness, those are spaces where children are nurtured, loved, and their development can really take off. That's a big piece of the equation here. And that's a big part of what I hope is invested by our appropriators. I lied. One last thing I got to say real quick is when we talk about accountability, I'm not so worried about accountability of how the money is spent, meaning, if we put it into home-based providers or pre-care, childcare, or whatever the case might be. I'm more worried about us in the legislature supplanting funding. I'm worried about us saying, well, we've got these 200 million coming from the permanent fund. Maybe we don't invest as much from the general fund. And that's what we're going to have to keep an eye on, both as legislators, but also as advocates, because the last thing we want is to just shift money around and not increase the investments now that we've grown the pie of funding. I'll stop there. Thank you all very much for the opportunity. Looking forward to answering any questions.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. We do have a question in the chat from Michelle Meters. And her question is, did we have to do something similar to add publicly funded kindergarten? How did the state constitution define education for funding from the land grant fund? So 2 questions.
Thank you. That's a great point, and that is a fantastic point. This legislation will receive the consent of Congress, and so Senator Heinrich is working on that legislation. But in my opinion, it's not necessary. The Ferguson Act that was mentioned talks about the state defining its common schools. And so we as a state can define our common schools. So there was no constitutional crisis when we created kindergarten in the early 70s. Our common schools can include early childhood education. However, our friends in the Senate were adamant about the consent to Congress. So when a Senate bill comes over to my committee, well, we always add consent to the governor to their legislation. But we will, but Senator Heinrich's really looking forward to working with his colleagues on that. The senators from the Western states are very, very knowledgeable about their permanent funds and the agreements they had with the federal government. So it may loosen some of that rigidity so that at some point we can get completely out from under the Ferguson Act and manage our funds as like any other state in the country.
Great, thank you. And next question from Joan Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, representatives. It was an absolute honor to fight beside you guys all these years. And throughout my journey, started with Olay. I see the wonderful Andrea Serrano on here. And then went into my own nonprofit, and I now work for the local 412, which is Building Trades, Plumber, and Pipe Fitters Union. How does the benefits of this initiative translate to other organizations and our state as a whole to show that there are benefits for everybody? This isn't just about educators.
That's a great question. Look, my personal vision for this is that New Mexico will become a state where childcare is whether it's fully free for some people and maybe sliding scale for others. When it comes to the workforce, when it comes to your constituency, Joan, there's nothing more difficult than being a young parent and starting a new job and not really knowing where you're going to leave your kid. We're unfortunately not a society where we afford people the ability to take paid maternity or paternity leave, parental leave. We don't do that. Even our best employers, whether it's UNM or some of these other big institutions, don't really offer that. And so to be able to have a place where you can leave your child, where they're going to be taken care of, and where it's not going to cost you the same as like your monthly mortgage payment is a big deal. I think those types of nuts and bolts effects will be felt right away. Beyond that, I think we're talking about children that are growing up healthy and children who are growing up in spaces where they are not experiencing the childhood trauma that maybe many of us have experienced. And that's not to say that these kids need to, they'll go through the school system and they'll succeed and they'll become doctors and lawyers or, terminal degreed people. Many of them might choose to go into the trades. As you know, we have a crisis of tradespeople. We don't have enough young people coming up to be plumbers and electricians and sheet metal workers and carpenters, etc. We've got to change that. We've got to change that dynamic. So early childhood doesn't mean we're prepping you to go to college. It means we're helping you be a healthy kid so that you grow up to be a healthy adult who makes healthy choices. So you'll have your folks will feel the effects right away because they'll be able to take their kid to childcare and not pay an arm and a leg for it. And then over the next 20, 30 years, society itself will improve because there will be a lot less children experiencing these traumatic experiences, children.
Thank you, Representative Martinez. By the way, love your jersey, Somos Unidos. Right on. Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat or any more hands raised, so we're going to move on. I want to thank you both, two members of the New Mexico House who fought long and hard to get this amendment on the ballot. We appreciate your efforts. And when the amendment passes, a portion of the funds will go to K-12. We are fortunate to have representatives from the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, and the National Education Association, NEA. First, we will hear from Whitney Holland, AFT State President. Whitney, thank you for being here. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I am going to try real quick and screen share. I am honored to be included and spend my Saturday morning with friends and like-minded individuals. So like it was mentioned, there is an impact on K-12, and that's kind of where we come into the mix. This work naturally ties into our overarching goal of having fully funded schools and making sure that all New Mexican students have access to schools that are free and fair and appropriate and meaningful to their personal experiences. So what this looks like in practice is about a 40% allocation, about $65 million. So that is specifically earmarked for enhancing instruction for at-risk students, lengthening the school year, which you've probably all heard a lot about, and then compensation for public school teachers. So this is how in our office, in our organization, how we interpret this. Enhanced instruction for students at risk of failure. And that would tie right into Yahtzee Martinez. There is a lot that is outlined in the Yahtzee Martinez ruling. And as educators, I came from the classroom last year. There's always things that I think we could be areas of improvement for us constantly. We're reflective on our practice. And I think this money would help go a long way with that. We also read it to mean it could fund community schools, which our siblings at NEA will probably talk about too, but community schools are vital hubs in our community. And I feel like that is an important step forward for New Mexico public schools. It also means we could hire more specialized support services. Those are our ancillary staff, our social workers, our physical therapists, our occupational therapists. Those are hard to staff positions, and we're hopeful that this money could go a long way into recruiting and retaining harder to staff positions. Lengthening the school year is a hot topic in New Mexico. We heard quite a bit about it in this legislative session. There's a pilot for that, so that could be a full year of learning. We also, and I want to flag that, you probably saw the asterisk on my last slide about the increase to teacher pay. It is our belief, we wholeheartedly believe that it is not just teachers that make our schools run, it's our bus drivers, our custodians. And so we're hopeful that this language could be more flexible to increase not just teacher pay, but those, like I mentioned, harder to staff ancillary services that are so vital to our communities. And what comes next? So how this looks in practice in AFT New Mexico. So we believe, again, that this should be bipartisan support. It should be a slam dunk, but we are always cautiously optimistic and don't take anything for granted. So our strategy is just spreading awareness, having these kinds of community conversations, having conversations about this funding to friends and family and our members. We've also included a question on our candidate endorsement questionnaire, if I could talk, that talks not just about if you support this amendment, but also what that would look like for you. So we want to know that, are you walking the talk and making this happen and have a tangible plan for increasing awareness? And then everything we do is tied to voting, turning out members, turning out union family members, turning out neighbors, anything we can do. So with that, I will turn it over to our friends. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I think we have very, very similar goals also with our sister union. So I'm Bethany Gerald. I've been a preschool teacher in Alamogordo, New Mexico for 17 years. So pre-K education is really my passion. And this year I've had the opportunity to be on release from school, working specifically on early childhood policy with other national fellows with NEA. And so this has become a focus that it's been my passion for a while. So last summer, NEA New Mexico surveyed all of our members around New Mexico to determine our priorities. And passing this early childhood amendment was very high on the list from our members around the state. We're experiencing a monumental shortage of teachers and educational employees in New Mexico and around the whole country right now. And that makes it challenging to meet all of our students' needs. So knowing that 40% of this 1.25% will be distributed to K-12 schools to support at-risk students, extending the school year and teacher compensation could be a huge relief for all the stresses we're feeling right now. These funds can be used to fill huge staffing gaps, such as social workers, counselors, nurses, as well as teachers and assistants, and all other needed positions in our schools to help support our students' mental health, social, emotional well-being, as well as their academic progress. We need to be supporting whole children and not just focusing on academics so our students in New Mexico can be successful. These funds can also be used where it talks about teacher compensation, and we appreciate this huge raise the teachers are going to be getting this year. But that leaves some educators who've been in the classroom a long time in a compressed salary schedule, where a teacher who's been teaching for 30 years may be making almost the same as a teacher who's been teaching for 5. And so some of these funds can be used to help decompress some of that salary schedule to support educators who've been in the classroom a long time and are very successful in supporting students and building relationships with students and their families in staying in the classroom longer. As Whitney said, community schools are a huge focus for NEA New Mexico as well as AFT. And community schools serve as a hub for the community in the neighborhood where the schools are. And they provide services to support not just the child, but the whole community with meals and health services and whatever that neighborhood is needing. Those community schools work to provide and meet those needs. So these funds can be used very specifically for supporting the expansion of community schools in New Mexico. So as related to the extended school year piece, we really advocate that any possible extended school year needs to be decided and negotiated at the local level, because we all know that not all communities are the same and have the same needs. And what we're doing, we have to make sure we're actually supporting the needs that our students and their families have. So any of those decisions for extending the school year need to be focused on the local level. But we are excited to move forward and support the way this can help support all of our New Mexico children. So thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much. That was Brittany Harrell, NEA State Vice President, and that was Whitney Holland, AFT State President. We thank you for your time and your efforts for this really important amendment. The Democratic Party of Sandoval County strongly supports unions. We're very labor friendly, and we very much appreciate the work being done on behalf of teachers and staff by AFT and NEA. Moving on, it's time for some advocacy and history about the amendment from 2 longtime advocates for children and their families. James Jimenez has a long history of involvement in issues affecting our citizens. After many years at the helm of New Mexico Voices for Children, he now heads the New Mexico for Children Action Fund. The fund will be very active in support of the amendment. He is joined by Eric Griego, a former state senator. Eric headed the Working Families Party and is now with the Center for Civic Action. Welcome, gentlemen. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Alex. Can I share my screen?
I believe you can, yes.
Can you all see that? There we go. Okay. James, you want to go first, or you want to jump in?
Yeah, go right ahead, Eric.
So I'm Eric Griego Montoya. Some of you know me as Eric Griego. I added Montoya to honor my mom, who's passed 20 years ago. I just wondered what some of you are like, what's with the Montoya? So I'm proud to honor my Montoya wing of the family. So we're just gonna. You've heard a lot of really good information, and I know that the representatives and the others who've done a ton of work on this have got into some of the details. We just wanted to sort of start pivoting to the campaign piece that's really around how we get Democrats in particular excited about this. So thank you for having us. I'm gonna get going, and then James will jump in, and I know Andrea will have some things to say as well. So you heard the history, you heard a little bit about where the money's going. So we're gonna really focus on where voters are and how we think we can win specifically with Democrats and folks on this call who are really good at kind of activating Democrats to get this done. So we've been trying to do this since 2010, believe it or not. Voices, I think Mo and Representative Maestas and Representative Martinez mentioned Bill Jordan, or maybe it was Lieutenant Governor who's been on the front lines. He was one of the brainchild. This is one of his brainchilds, along with some other folks and voices. Me and Jerry and some other folks who've been working on this for a long time, and it was great to have such amazing champions in the legislature take it on. He mentioned that, with the help of a lot of people on this call, we changed the makeup of the Senate, which was crucial. We never would have got it out of there had we not had a very different, and the House, a much more pro-early childhood Democratic Party in both houses. So we've talked about the numbers, so I won't dwell on those. We can talk a little bit more about those. And one thing we haven't said is we've actually done some estimates around the unmet need, and I think both of the sponsors talked about this. And one study, I think there are others, but estimates it's at least $400 million per year. So even though this is going to pump up a good significant amount of money into early childhood, even with that money, we're not going to be fully funding early childhood in the opinion of many experts who've looked at this. But it gets us a lot closer to where we want to be. Representative Maestas, I know, pays close attention to the fund, and he posted some numbers. It's $25.5 billion. We rounded up, hoping that it's going to continue to grow, which everybody seems to think is the case. Gives you a ballpark of how much money we're headed for. I think those numbers are a little bit also optimistic because, as Representative Maestas says, we use the rolling average, so it might be a little less than that, but hopefully we'll get to 200 million. And closer to 65 million for K-12 to add from this. I'm going to pass it over to James now and let him and Andrea take some of these other slides.
Thanks, Eric. And Karen, thank you so much for putting this together. And Alex, great job as always steering the ship for us. Before I start, I just want to give a shout out to two of my board members. NMVC Action Fund is a 501c4 organization that does work both in the campaign space, but also the policy space. And Austin Wiaki and Lori Martinez, two of my board members, are with us this morning. So one of the things I'd like to point out is that in the early years of this fight, this concept, as Eric noted, came about because of work that Eric led when he was the executive director of New Mexico Voices for Children. But one of the things that we were fighting about, and Representative Maestas kind of alluded to this, about Representative Martinez did too, that about just exactly where the money is going, and are we going to be putting all 3-year-olds in a classroom? And the answer to that is no, we are not going to be doing that. But several years ago, the Legislative Finance Committee did what I called a drive-by analysis of our child care system. And I call it a drive-by analysis because they didn't really dig into kind of some of the more fundamental aspects of child care in our state. They were highly critical of our child care system because it didn't meet certain educational outcomes. Well, if you think back about what child care was initially created for. It was primarily a work support program. It was not primarily an education program. And as a result, we have never funded it as an education program. Now, we agree that we should evaluate our early education programs based upon education standards. But if we're going to do that, we have to fund it at the level that it needs to be funded. And so what does that mean? We've heard some talk already from Bethany and Whitney about child care workers. We know that child care workers are not the best paid early care workers in the state. If we are really going to be valuing child care as a system, we have to value the workers that are in that system. Olay has been a real leader in trying to fight for wages that are really important for people to be able to stay in that system as they gain more knowledge and more experience. One other aspect of the early care program that can be funded through these dollars is the home visiting program. A lot of new parents don't have the kind of family supports around them that they need in understanding really what it takes to raise a healthy child. Early childhood brain development is understood in a very different way today than it was maybe 40 or 50 years ago. And programs like home visiting programs that are both publicly and privately provided offer young parents the opportunity to really understand how their children are developing, if they are developing at the levels that they should be, and if not, where they can get the kinds of services that they need. So let's go to the next slide, Eric. You know, what do the voters think? Well, a few years ago, or last year really, the CHI St. Joseph Children and Latino Decisions Insights did some polling on this. This is an issue that has always polled really well, well above 75%, because I think people at a real gut level understand that if we want to have a strong economy, if we want to have a strong state that moves us away from all the negative rankings where we are, then we need to be investing more in early childhood education and the kind of people that offer early childhood education, quality early childhood education. So the percentages in terms of the support on the face look pretty good, but we're not taking anything for granted, as Whitney says. As Representative Maestas also indicated, we know that there's going to be some opposition. I'm going to let my partner, Andrea Serrano, talk about the campaign aspects of it, but be aware that while the numbers look good on their face, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done if we are going to get this passed. And frankly, it's going to be Democrats that pass this. So, Andrea?
Thank you so much, James and Eric, for laying that groundwork and that trip down memory lane. I've been with Olay now for almost 10 years. And so to see the fund grow astronomically over those last 10 years, to see this measure not make it through the roundhouse time and time again, and then to finally see it on the ballot, it's a reality. It brings us so much excitement and so much joy, and it also is a huge lift, and we need every single person to turn out for this ballot initiative. So the folks who are on this call today who are spending a Saturday talking about this, we know that you have an investment. So I just want to appreciate all of you who are joining the call today, who are taking the time to know this issue inside and out, but who are also asking, how can we help? How can we make sure that this passes? And so one of those is that we are making it a top issue in Democratic primaries. And so we're already asking candidates, to speak on this issue, to share whether or not they support this ballot initiative, to make it publicly known that they support this ballot initiative. I think one of the things we need to see is for every Democrat to embrace the Yes for Kids ballot initiative. That's what the official campaign is being called, is Yes for Kids. We need every single Democrat to embrace this ballot initiative and lift it up as a priority. And so, so asking candidates at candidate forums, raising your hand and saying, hey, you haven't talked about the ballot initiative for early ed yet. Where are you at with that? And really letting candidates know that you as voters are really making sure that they're making this a priority in their candidacy. I understand that candidates have a lot, right? They have a lot of issues that they really need to speak to. But this issue, it's exciting. It excites Democrats, and conventional wisdom tells us that whoever the party of the president, of the current president, they have a really hard time in midterm elections. And we can prove them wrong. New Mexico often proves people wrong. I'm so tired of this, like, oh, we're last in this, and we're 50th in that, and things are terrible. Okay, fine, yeah, but we also know how to address it. We know better than anyone how to fix it. We're hardy people. We live in the high desert. And so we know that this ballot initiative is something that's actually going to make the difference in not only lives today, but this is creating a generational shift for our families. This is creating an entire system that is going to be funded by money that belongs to us, that belongs to our people. New Mexico will be the first state in the country to ensure that early education is a right for all children age 0 to 5, early education and home visiting. That's huge. No other state is doing what we're doing. We're innovative, we're exciting, and we need to make sure that everyone around us feels that excitement. So it really is about being excited about this. We have great numbers, but we know that numbers can shift. We know that there's going to be opposition to this measure. We know that, there's going to be oil and gas. We know the Republican Party, nearly every Republican voted against this ballot initiative to get it onto the ballot. We also know that one of the people running for governor in this primary as a Republican, kind of sits on the fence, voted for HJR1 in 2021, but has also been really vocally against it. And so, we absolutely need to ensure that we are saying, if you are with the Democratic Party, then you are for Yes for Kids. That's it. Full stop. We need to turn out 370,000 voters in the 2022 general election in November. So just so there's no confusion, there won't be any form of this question on the primary ballot, but we're starting early because we want to see this become an issue for Democrats in the primaries. And so, the fact that, again, Sandoval County Dems are putting on this forum, so thank you so much. Karen and Alex have been working with us a lot to get this day here. We just want to ensure that that all of us are excited about this, and all of us are working on this, and all of us are talking about this in the same way. There is an official campaign for this, and someone just mentioned in the chat that there is a lot of social media. So there's an Instagram, a Twitter account, a Facebook account. Please follow them. What I'm working on, James and Eric, we're working in a specific, very part of the campaign, which is really connecting this campaign with the Democrats, because we know Democrats are going to carry this. I always tell this story about when I was a kid, and I was, the very first president I can remember as a kid was Reagan. And my dad was just in a really bad mood every time Reagan was on the news. Every time Reagan came up, my dad was just in a really bad mood. And I finally asked, and he said, well, we're Democrats. And I was very curious. I'm like, well, what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans? He said, Democrats care about the people. Like, that was it, right? That there was no other explanation given. And so this is an issue that is for all of us. This is going to improve the lives of children and families. This is going to improve the lives of early educators who deserve professional wages and currently are not making them. This is also going to strengthen and bolster our K-12 system. And so this is something that is going to really embrace. We're going to really need every single person to embrace. I see questions in the chat, and so we'll start to get to those. But you know, we just want to ensure that folks are following the campaign, but understanding that this part of it, as we're connecting it with the Democratic Party, Eric and James and myself are the folks to contact. If you want to start helping out with the general campaign, just go to their Facebook, which is Yes for Kids on Facebook, and I'll drop those links in a second, and follow them and stay apprised. And I don't mean to say like follow them and follow us. We are all one big campaign. It's just, you know, we again, follow the rules. Democrats follow the rules. And so we're being very mindful of parts of the campaign are not partisan, and we want to follow those laws. And so where it's legally permissible, that's where we're here talking to the Democratic Party.
Great, thank you, Andrea. For those of you who don't know Andrea, she is an Albuquerque native who's been working in nonprofits and social justice organizations since 1999. And I love the story about how she's inspired, or she has been inspired by her mother, who was on a picket line while pregnant with her. That's beautiful. Her father was a state representative, New Mexico state representative in the late 1960s. She began with Ole, New Mexico in 2012 as a conservation organizer and is now executive director. So we really appreciate her insight and her guidance on this really, really important issue. So we have some time for questions. And so let me see, I know we have some in the chat. I'm going to back it up because you really got a lot of action. You guys got a lot of comments and questions. So we have, let's see, let's help educators. Delbert Schaefer says, let's help educators and explain the amendment. We need to emphasize that benefit will go to the entire state, and we need to get out the vote. From Lori Martinez, question about the strategy for the campaign. The draft language for the ballot in November has early childhood education named at the end and language about K-12 at the beginning, including the reference to extending the school year, which is potentially a hot button issue. I believe it's intended to include extended learning opportunities, not just possible extension of the school year, but I'm concerned that this creates an opening for misunderstandings about the legislation and also an opportunity for opponents. What are some of the talking points we should be encouraging people to use to proactively address this? I heard one so far, that decision to extend a district school year are made at the local level. Can you guys address that?
Yikes. Well, I'll take a crack at it. I know I think Representative Maestas is still on, and Andrea and James. So it's a great point, Lori. I mean, I think given that the compromise was to put both K-12 and our education partners and early childhood in the language, I do think it's going to be an opening, frankly, for opponents to say, you know, didn't we do all this other great stuff for K-12? Didn't we create this other trust fund? So there's going to be a lot of noise out there. I mean, we were all feeling much better about it before the fund ironically grew so much. So now it's actually, we have our work cut out for us. So a couple of answers is, one is there'll be more polling again on the C3 side, on the education campaign side, that'll help all of us talk about it better. We have to keep the separation, as some of you know, between working on partisan stuff that James and Andrea and are working on. But on the Yes for Kids side, I know there's going to be more polling, and I really encourage you to talk to them about making sure they're polling on this stuff, just so we can figure out what people's concerns are and we can ask those questions in the polling. We're not really supposed to be talking to them very much, but I really encourage folks to say, look, I'm hearing this, or what about this? And it'll help us get much better information. I think there's a lot of good funding to get really good information from voters about where they have questions. And then we can tailor both campaigns to responding to that. That's the best I can do, but I know maybe Andrea or James or Representative Maestas have some other ideas.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Representative.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. Thanks, everybody. be prepared for massive amounts of misinformation. I mean, throughout the years, there was just massive amounts of misinformation and disinformation. I think the Albuquerque Journal is going to come in heavy with, 4 or 5 ridiculous op-eds. The Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce was probably the last organization to speak negatively in committee. But I think the Santa Fe paper, the Cruces paper, I don't anticipate an anti-constitutional amendment pack, being formed. But like you said, there's just conservative folks, Republicans, there's 35% going to vote no on any constitutional amendment. So we just got to stick to our messaging, stick to the kids, stick to the future, and assure people that that this is simply making funds available, and then we as appropriators then spend it wisely under the, through the direction of the early childhood education department and all of the transparency and metrics that go into that department.
And yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. Like we've already seen the Journal. They started at the end of last year putting out op-eds against Yes for Kids. And I think it's going to intensify. And I think we've heard all along, business coalitions and all kinds of folks really speaking out against this. And so it's one of those things, and I say this as someone who's very argumentative, it's one of those things where you have to be paying attention to what the opposition is saying, and you have to smack down any kind of lies that are coming out. But this really is also a really great chance to get people excited to go out and vote in November. Again, there's a lot of folks who keep saying, conventional wisdom is low turnout, blah, blah. No one cares. What we know is that a race is as good as we run it, right? And so if we sort of give in to that thinking that no one's going to turn out and no one's excited, if we give into that thinking, then, well, yeah, no one's going to be excited. And so, we have to work together and amplify the message, as like every single person on this call is a messenger for passing Yes for Kids, for ensuring that we get also, good folks into office who are going to pass the enabling legislation, or who are going to continue to support ensuring that the early education department exists, and ensuring that these policies that matter to us exist. Good policy comes from good policy makers. And so part of what's exciting about this ballot initiative is it also benefits its supporters who are going to be on the ballot in November. So we really need to make that connection of, these are the folks who support early education, right? Like we have to be very, very clear about that, and really be rooted in our communities and helping our folks understand that this is actually something that's really good. Totally understand about saving money. So there's other pieces that were really wisely written into this bill that our sponsors, Representatives Maestas and Martinez have really been vocal about for a long time, is that there's this also, protections in there. If the fund suddenly started to drop, very rapidly, there's protections in there to stop the funding being dispersed until, folks figure out what's going on with the land grant permanent fund. And so there's this idea that like, oh, this is going to drain the fund, $26 million going to early education out of a $26 billion fund. And sort of having this idea that, we're just like running around throwing cash, that doesn't make sense, right? So what we really do is we talk about how this is going to benefit our families. It's a New Mexican value to take care of each other and for our families to be looked after. And so, we move this ballot initiative with our values first, and that's how we win.
And I just had one thing building upon what Andreas said. I think that's why groups like the ones that put this forum together today are so critically important for getting the word out and turning people out to vote. That's what's going to win. It's Democrats getting out to vote. It's Democrats talking to each other. It's Democrats mobilizing the base to get out and vote. That's what's going to get this passed, because as Andreas says, we do have these New Mexican values about taking care of family, taking care of children, building for the future. And I think that those messages are going to help they're going to resonate, and they're going to transcend some of the negativity we're going to hear about this.
Great. Do I have any more questions from people on the call in the Zoom? I do have a comment from former Democratic Party of New Mexico Chair Marg Elliston. Says the oil and gas folks have been opposing this for decades. For some reason, they think they will have to pay more taxes, and we need to keep enforcing the yes for kids message. I agree. Flora, I see you have your hand up. You have the
Yes.
floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alex. Such a pleasure working by your side through all of this. And thank you, Andrea, Representative Maestas, Representative Martinez, Eric, and the rest of you. What you do is nothing short of phenomenal. And the strides you have taken to get this far amazes me. And I am so proud of each and every one of you. And I am so excited for this general election. This is something, it brings me to tears because our state has needed this for so long. And you know, that you all have stuck to it and brought it to fruition. We're gonna be there. We're gonna be there to bring it home and make this the thing that turns the corner for New Mexicans. So thank you all for what you're doing. I really get baffled in thinking, how can anybody be against this? I mean, like, yeah, billions of dollars are sitting out there, and we just want a little bit to improve our people's lives. And so I look forward to working with you on this, and thank you once again. You guys are wonderful.
Thank you so much, Flora, and for all the work that you've done over so many years to support, to ensure that, you know, those good policymakers are in office and that they're supported. And so extending to you, as you know, for Bernalillo County Dems to have, you know, that we'd be happy to have this same kind of conversation to get folks excited, you know, and talking to county parties statewide. You know, I think part of what is going to make this such a strong campaign is that it really is, you know, a homegrown campaign, and it's coming from the people of this state. So I'm super excited for that. So yeah, we'll get it. You have my email, Flora. We'll get in touch. And you know, I think other people are asking, like, how can you be involved? How can you help? I dropped the links to the social media in the chat, and the campaign is officially called Yes for Kids. But you can also get in touch with us either at OLE or at Voices Action or at Center for Civic Action to talk specifically about the partisan work that we're doing. And we're really focused on the early ed side. I don't want to speak on behalf of AFT and NEA, but I'm sure you can contact Whitney and Bethany directly as well. So, but you know, really reaching out. And again, if you have any kind of event where you have a group of people who would be really excited about supporting this, if your group is, if you have a group in mind that's more nonpartisan, there's also the more nonpartisan part of the campaign that can go and talk to your groups as well. So it's oh, thank you, Flora, for putting that in the chat. It's exciting. And Eric, if you wanted to put the slide back up with our emails so that folks could write them down. And if you want to get in touch with us, just shoot us an email. Oh, he already typed them in.
There it is. That was fast, huh? Thank you so much, Andrea.
In my mind.
I'm going to ask one more round. Are there any more questions for our panelists?
I don't really have a question, Madam Chair. I just was seeing some conversation in the chat that are in regards to the early childhood and education care department being able to raise the cutoff level for childcare contracts to 350% of the federal poverty level. And that was an amazing thing, an amazing move. But as I'm sure James and Andrea and Eric know, the co-payments under this new structure for anybody above 200% of FPL are still extraordinarily unaffordable for families. And I think Andrea could, representing so many New Mexico families, may be able to expound on that a little.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues that families have faced have been co-pays and also a really unsteady system. One of the pieces that we really tackled was years ago suing CYFD because specifically for the childcare assistance portion was because they were doing things like giving parents a childcare assistance contract for a week or for 3 days. Or for 6 months, or it was sort of at the whim of whatever caseworker you had that day. And so this was under the Martinez administration that this sort of really unsteady system was running. And so, now they give out childcare assistance for a year at a time. And one of the things that's been really important is that there haven't actually been co-pays until July for anyone below 200% below the federal poverty line. And so that's been really good that there haven't been any co-pays. Even if they're smaller co-pays, there's still co-pays. And so those co-payments, though, for anyone above that, from the 200 to 400% above, the fact that there are co-payments does create a hardship. Families in New Mexico spend an incredible amount of their monthly budget on early education when the federal guideline, I think, is something like 10% of the family's budget. And it's double and even triple that at times. And so what we're looking at with passing this constitutional amendment is infusing money into a system that will immediately benefit families who are, working families, as well as early educators, center directors. One of the key components of this is, right now there's tens of thousands of, children who still aren't in any kind of early education, who don't have access to home visiting. Home visiting is huge. It makes a huge difference in the lives of children from newborn status. And it provides a huge support to families. And so this will immediately bolster up that system. So that piece around the co-pays is going to be really important to address once we get the actual ballot initiative passed. And then it's going to, then the enabling legislation is going to really start to impact exactly those issues. And Eric put our contact info in the chat. And once again, offering that we're happy to speak with folks. And go ahead, James.
Yeah, and on Andrea, building upon an observation that Michelle had, if any of you are involved in doing candidate endorsement questionnaires, please make sure that this becomes yes for kids, not just check, I'm going to check that box, but here's what I'm going to do about it as part of my campaign. If you need some help thinking about the wording on it, I think I can volunteer Andrea and Eric and myself to help you write those questionnaires, or we can show you the wording that we are going to be using at NMVC Action Fund.
Great.
Excellent. That's awesome. Thank you so much, James. I know that the Democratic Party of Sandoval County is handing out questionnaires for candidate assistance. So we would really appreciate the wording for a question to add to our forms, our process. And I think that's it. Do we have any more questions or comments?
Really quick, I just dropped what Olay is using in the chat. And a few other of our ally organizations are using this, and even organizations who don't traditionally lift up early education as one of their key issues are lifting this issue up. So it really is a big team effort, and folks are excited about it. So you're welcome to use that wording or modify it to your own needs. I think one of the things that's really beneficial of that is that as candidates start to see that everyone's asking that question, it becomes very apparent that they need to be front and center with it.
Thank you so much. Yes, I already copied it, pasted it on a Word document so we can alter our form. So thank you very, very much for that. That's gold. So we have our marching orders, and I want to ask everyone on the call. We have a lot of community organizers. We have a lot of people who are very involved with trying to make meaningful changes for our communities, our counties, our municipalities throughout the state. And I thank you all for that. The very least we can do is vote for this. That's the least we can do. We can also talk to friends and family. We can also become more involved so that when we reach a roadblock about this issue, we have talking points and we understand what is really at stake, and we can convey that to people, right? We can also make sure that we the candidates who we're supporting are informed about this and are also talking about this. We need to talk about this across the board. And the other thing that we need to make sure that we do, and I have this from Democratic Party. Can y'all see that? I can't tell if you can see it. Democratic Party of New Mexico has this nice little card. It says, get involved. You guys can't see it, can you? Anyway, and it also says register to vote. So what we really need to do is we really need to get out, and we also need to register new voters. And we need to make sure that they know about Yes for Kids and that they get involved. So let's spread the word. Let's get out the vote. Let's support candidates who support Yes for Kids. And let's make sure we keep on supplying more and more information to our groups about this. So with that, I want to thank all of you for attending. In particular, I want to go through and thank our partners again: Bert Cox from Sandoval County Indivisible, Laura Stokes from Progressive Democrats of Central New Mexico, Chris Dahl from Placitas Dems, Deb Dabson from the Sandoval County Federation of Democratic Women, our special guest speakers, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, Representative Martinez, Representative Maestas, Bethany Harrell of NEA, Whitney Holland of AFT, Andrea Serrano from Ole, New Mexico, James Jimenez, and our special guests, Brian Colon, Kathleen Cates, Greg Bennett, and Catherine Brook. So I thank you all for attending, and Joan Baker, thank you. I thank you all for attending. I thank you for your support, and a special thank you to Karen Schaefer for spearheading this, organizing this, getting this all together. She is a powerhouse in Sandoval County, and her impact is being felt throughout the state. And we are so fortunate that she lives in Rio Rancho. So thank you to everyone. Flora, thank you for attending. We appreciate your support. My Emerge sister, big love to you. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great day. Get out and do something positive. The weather's wonderful. So thank you so much. Bye, everybody.